Welcome to our classroom. In this space, we talk about education, which is inclusive of, but not limited to, what happens in schools. Education is taking place whenever and wherever we are willing to learn. I am your host, Roberto Germán, and our classroom is officially in session. Lee & Low is the largest and most trusted multicultural children's book publisher in the U.S. A family-run, independent, and certified 100% minority-owned business enterprise, Lee & Low produces high-quality books about everyone for everyone, along with free educator resources to make meaningful use of each book in today's classroom. Email quotes@leeandlow.com today to start building a custom collection tailored to your unique needs, goals, and budget. Peace. Back again. All right, y'all, we ain't wasting no time. It's Roberto and Lorena.
Hey.
And we gonna dive into this one.
Let me just say that I'm very happy to be here, colleague, and I appreciate the continuous invitation to join in the conversation. I am encouraged by your collegiality.
Right on, right on. Well, welcome back. All right.
If you've missed any other podcasts, I am doing the best that I can to not be fired or banned. So that's why you're going to hear me refer to him as my colleague.
Without further delay, let's just jump right in.
Okay, fine.
All right, so you had written in a post a while ago that you can't teach the book The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, one of your favorites, and not discuss, drum roll please,
here we go,
the N-word. You state that ignoring it is irresponsible. How so? And how does a teacher engage their class in a discussion around this very controversial and complicated word? How? You know, it's like if you're in the classroom, I understand. A lot of people who've been there are like, yo, they're in the classroom and this hesitate. Ouch. Right? Pins and needles. Walking on eggshells. How do you teach this?
So dramatic.
It's a dramatic thing.
But yes, and let me just clarify. When I wrote that blog post several years ago, I was talking about Huck Finn, but you could really discuss this with so many other books like Mockingbird, right? Like there's so many other books that feature this word, or The Hate You Give, and others. So, one of the things that I explain in that blog is that it begins with love. And I say it that way because I think it's really important for teachers to... All
we need is love.
What song is that?
You got it. Come on, man.
Yeah. Okay, I got it.
Know your music.
Yes, no, but I do. Okay, don't interrupt me, please. I'm focused.
Sorry.
So, anyway, I say that it begins with love, just like I do in texture teaching when I'm talking about having these types of conversations with students, because when you start from a place of love, that is going to involve respect. That's going to involve tenderness and care. And so when we approach a conversation where people can be harmed, whether they're in the room or not, that love should hopefully guide us to be respectful and to be careful with how we have these conversations, and grounding the class in an understanding that the topic we're about to discuss is controversial, right? And that a lot of people have different and strong opinions about it, but that in this class, as we're looking at and talking about this word, we're going to approach it seriously, right? Like this is a somber conversation, even if there are funny moments, but that we're still looking at it through an academic lens, you know?
I think that people could lead from a place of love and still mess up, right?
Oh, yeah.
They can have the right intentions,
yeah, for sure.
And still the impact doesn't...
Right.
You still could have a negative impact.
Right, like what you want to do is just not what happened. It just went left field.
And so let's dig deeper in terms of strategy and planning and approach and whatnot, because I think there are a lot of loving teachers that don't necessarily teach this the right way.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we've got to be humble enough to apologize, to come back to the group and say, hey, what? I made a terrible mistake, and this is what it was. This is what I learned. This is how I should have done it, and that's how I'm going to do it moving forward.
All right,
and create space for the class to kind of engage with you in that conversation. I also think it really depends. Like, it just depends for me to even answer this question.
Can we back it up though? Can we back it up? Because you already have teachers apologizing for stuff, and I'm trying to like not even.
Oh, you're not talking about if they made a mistake.
Help them not even get to the place of having to apologize?
Well, yes and no.
Can we offer them some proactive strategies that they can implement as to teaching this effectively, and as a result, it doesn't cause the harm.
Right. And let me finish what I was saying. But I think it's okay for us to address that piece because that applies to any kind of lesson. And fear of harm is what stops teachers from addressing these conversations, right? So, you know, we're going to most probably at some point in every school year cause some kind of harm. We're going to make a mistake. We're imperfect beings, right? And so I think humility goes a long way here, but I won't dwell on that. So strategies, background building is important. Help kids and older students and adults, whoever you're working with, to understand the meaning of this word, right? Like to understand the difference between denotation, what something means, and connotation, how a word is used and what social meanings and implications it has. So that's one thing, right? Is to understand that the original word was in Spanish, negro, meaning black, and that it evolved in the linguistic use and the dropping of this letter and that sound, etc. And so we get to the N-word that, you know, we know today. And then obviously you can also have a conversation around the difference between the N-word that ends in A and the one that ends in ER. That's an entirely, that's a whole different thing. And it's wild because we're talking about 2 letters, 3 letters, right? But that is a conversation around etymology, denotation, connotation, linguistics, and society. It could be a really beautiful conversation.
Right. And talking about conversation, we know that student voice matters and their input should be welcome. And so let's talk about students needing to speak and be heard.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely starting the conversation it's important to just do check-ins, right? Like some emotional check-ins. How are you doing? Yeah, I'm nervous too. We're about to talk about this really big deal, right? And so kind of that temperature check in the room with everybody who's participating. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And then moving into like, so what do you think about this word? Is it a big deal? And having them do a little self-assessment. Maybe you collect these answers to see if their opinion changes by the time you're done with this unit or this lesson, whether it's a day, 3 days, 2 weeks, that's always interesting to see if anybody's mind has changed about this word and maybe their use of the word or the general use of the word. But getting their voices in there is going to be really important so that they feel like, yeah, this is really relevant and I get to participate in not just when I'm told in these conversations, right? But like also in how we move along through this learning process.
Yeah, and in addition to that, hopefully there's a diverse range of voices and points of view. Right.
And if you're lacking, right, that's the beauty of Zoom. We have it now. We can't unhave it, right? And there's videos and there's audios and there's spoken word poems. Like there's so many ways to bring in diverse points of view. To just enrich the conversation.
Yeah, you could also look at partnering with other schools, other educators.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't necessarily have to be there physically. You mentioned Zoom, so there's ways to bring folks into your classroom by utilizing technology.
Yeah.
So let's stop taking shortcuts. Let's stop making excuses and let's think creatively, let's think expansively, let's think inclusively as to ways that we can enrich this dialogue and ways to bring in more voices, more perspectives. Furthermore, let's think about the independent reflection space, which is key to this.
Right.
Can you build on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I just described in terms of their voices and getting them to reflect on their own use of the word and the general use of the word is important. You also want them to reflect like on the history of this word. Like, how is it that in 2024 we're still using this word socially? I mean, and what is the power of the word, right? And the concept that words have power. I mean, there's so much that they can reflect on, and maybe you want to invite them to think of words that aren't, you know, as widely used as the N word, but words that hurt them nonetheless. And words that have really harmful effects for them. Maybe they were used by a parent or a friend or a bully of some sort, you know. And so that individual reflection for students is so important. And sometimes, maybe dare I say, always, I don't know, but certainly often, can be more important than the actual like assessment, because that's where the character work happens, you know. They might pass a test, but maybe their character hasn't changed. Maybe they haven't grown. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think giving them space to reflect presents opportunities for us to collect data as to what they're processing, how this is impacting them, how things have impacted them in the past, how they engaging with language, right? All of these things are important. As is individual engagement with the teacher, right?
Yeah.
We know that's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just checking in and making sure that you are available, ready to engage with them, to meet with somebody, because again, this is a heavy topic. Some kids might have questions that they don't want to ask in the large group. Some kids might have something to share about something they've experienced, you know? And so, you know, a whole group discussion presents some really good opportunities for people to process and hear different points of view, but that one-on-one with you or that small group with you can unearth other things that could be really valuable as well. I mean, folks know that part, right, about small group.
Yeah, so many perspectives, right? And we're living in a different time period with social media and music, and the way, in this particular case, we're talking about the N word, the way it's used so loosely now, right? Like, it amazes me. I'm not gonna front. Like, when I'm in different places, whether I'm in my vehicle and there's other vehicles around me and they're bumping the music real high, or I'm in other spaces, sometimes sporting events, and like, they're playing all types of music, and like, it's so casual now. The use of the N word,
yeah,
it's so casual that I find it to be strange. How casual we approach it as a society here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I know other people are like, nah, I don't, they don't think about it twice. It's just whatever.
Well, for me, what's weird is like,
I find it uncomfortable.
When we're driving or I'm driving or something, and what you're describing happens, right? That loud music is bumping and it's all kinds of N-words. And I look over and it's like, not a Black person listening.
Yeah. And within the Black community, there's different perspectives on this too.
Right.
Like, I'm one that I just tend to refrain. I'd rather not.
Yeah.
I used to, when I was younger, and definitely when I was listening to certain music and certain type of artists, and when I was making music, or when I was making a certain type of music. But as I was growing, especially when I had my nephews around me and they were younger, and I used to bring them to the studio. We used to record in Framingham, Mass with my guy Mateo Gatz, and then on the way home I'd be thinking like,
Oh yeah.
Like, because as an artist, you always want to be listening to your music, critiquing it, getting a sense of like, you're hype, you just recorded it, but at the same time, you want to lend your critical ear to get a sense of what can be improved. And we'd be driving back from Framingham to Lawrence, and I'm like, nah, I can't play this, because my nephew's in here. And I don't want my nephew saying some of these words that I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so that thing started to impact me and started to change my approach. So then I used to start to, write music, regardless of who else was on the track and who was saying whatever. My verses, I was still trying to, get it off, but I was doing it without using the N-word or without cussing at all, without saying certain. I wanted it to convey a message that I felt like my nephews and others could digest. Like it would be fine for me to play it in the whip on the way back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for educators and folks in other spaces, we understand that a lesson on the N-word is not an easy thing.
Mm-mm.
It's uncomfortable for most
right.
folks. Regardless of how you
triggers.
Identify, regardless of your racial and ethnic background, some people might find it, perfectly comfortable, but
right.
I'd say for many people, maybe most people, it's an uncomfortable lesson to engage in, especially considering, the makeup of your audience.
Yeah.
And so, we offer this because we want to have real conversations. We want to touch upon things that bring tension to learning spaces, and we want to support folks as much as possible. Obviously, we're giving you a taste right here, but for those who want to engage more deeply, you already know what time it is. Reach out to us at multiculturalclassroom.com. Love to dig in further with you and support you as best possible. Anything else you want to add to this before we wrap?
Yeah, I think that planning goes a long way here. Planning for even what you don't expect, right? So just having a plan B, having alternate things, but don't avoid this because you're scared. And this is a really important lesson and or conversation to have if you work at a predominantly white institution. There are so many kids using this word and words like it because they don't understand the gravity and or maybe don't care. But I just think it's because they don't really understand. And so this is, that's why I said at the beginning of this blog that it was irresponsible, and I stand by that, to not have these conversations, particularly when they show up in these books. So I hope this has been, somewhat useful and encouraging.
Well, and you mentioned, particularly if you work in a predominantly white institution, and I get why you're saying that. Mm-hmm. I want to also add that this is an important lesson for all groups, right?
Yeah.
Because now I'm thinking about some of the places in which we've taught,
right,
including predominantly Spanish-speaking schools and Spanish-speaking populations where kids are coming from the islands or they're coming from some of the other places, and they're just using this word,
right,
and they have no real context, no understanding,
right.
And that is problematic.
Yeah.
Regardless of who they say it to.
Agreed.
But then they might be also using it, and they might be using it not just amongst their Spanish-speaking peers, but now they might be using it or directing it to somebody who identifies as Black. And so there's layers to peel back there too, right? Sure. And again, we could go down all these different racial and ethnic groups, but I'm using that because it's the first thing that comes to mind in terms of some of the spaces in which we've taught and led schools and whatnot, in which we know that, that it was a problem there, and one that needs addressing.
Yep, I agree.
So This is, it needs to be addressed in predominantly white schools, but it also needs to be addressed in all these other spaces with all these different makeups of kids. All of our kids need to understand the cultural context, the current context. They need to have this common language, and the nature of these conversations. And when I say these, now I'm not just referring to a conversation around the N-word. I'm referring to courageous conversations, right? The nature of these courageous conversations, and name the courageous thing that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Not just race,
Right.
needs to be normalized.
Yeah.
You know, I know there's a big push to shut down these conversations,
Right.
and that there's factions of people that, you know, think it's divisive or not necessary or something, but no. We need to normalize these conversations, so that we're better preparing our kids to understand more deeply, to engage and think critically, and to be able to navigate a world of differences here in the United States and beyond. As always, your engagement in our classroom is greatly appreciated. Be sure to subscribe, rate the show, and write a review. Finally, for resources to help you understand the intersection of race, bias, education, and society, go to multiculturalclassroom.com. Peace and love from your host, Roberto Germán.